Hello and welcome back to this Downplay Dualistic Crusade. This will be a short video going over the nice stack of books I picked up from our local used bookshops, and we have finally got a half-price books location, and they did one of their usual periodical store sales where you just wander in and pretty much the whole store is 20 or 30% off. And as with any bookshop, you never know what's going to turn up there, so I try to stop by whenever they have one of those sales because usually they're bargain bins and their collectible book sections have a lot of really interesting things turn up, and of course the 20% off helps. But it's amazing they also do it on their clearance and bargain bins. You can find some great stuff and get books for less than $1, which is always nice to your wallet and has such a great ring to it that you come home with even more books because why leave affordable cheap books somewhere because you're never going to find them again that cheap, and then you buy them and then you get home and you tell yourself, I don't have room for any of these, what have I done? But of course that's really the curse of being a bookworm. All bookworms are going to know these words I'm saying, so I don't have to intonate them over and over. I'm sure you feel my same pain, but to go over these really quick, it's a nice little stack, but some interesting titles and some stuff I've been wanting to get physical copies of for a while. To start with the series books, of course, the first thing I do pretty much anywhere is look for the series I collect, and of course look for whatever Hardy Boys editions they have. So they had a copy of one of the later books in the Undercover Brothers series. So this is, I believe, from 2008, and this is Haunted and is credited as the official Ghost Stories edition. It's, I think, a little tiny bit longer than the typical Undercover Brothers entry, but it's got the same sort of artwork from this time period. Again, this is from 2008. I've never been very much into the more modern renderings of the series because once they killed off the digests in 2005, that was really the last sort of traditional series type because it was basically continuing on from when they changed hands in the 1970s. So that was when the sort of official timeline of the original books kind of broke, and they've tried different series since then. But since these have been drying up, I try to pick them up wherever I can, and this one is how you find most copies. They're a little worn, but it's still in pretty good shape. But what I did notice, and I'm noticing more and more on these, is this is a 2008 book, but as you can very clearly see, it's already got quite a bit of tanning inside. So not only are these getting harder to find if you want to go for completion, it's harder to get them in good shape. They are starting to go up on the used market because they've now been out of print for some time. So this is just one closer to getting the full set and one of the harder to come by ones. Another series I've collected my whole life, and these are absurdly rare to stumble across. So anytime I find just any random volume, I do that little happy dance. Even if it's something I already have, I'm just happy to see it. But these were also marked down very inexpensively, so I was able to get. This is from the Scholastic printings, which are a particular smaller size and also have unique cover art. But this is one of my favorite series of all time, Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators. This is the later Scholastic printing of, I believe this is book 9, Mystery of the Screaming Clock. They all had fantastic titles. And again, the cover art is unique to these, so if you are a fan, it's also important to collect the little Scholastic editions. Now, these were primarily sold through book clubs and schools, I believe, and they all have this smaller size. Even though they are smaller and not as iconic as the original hardcovers and the later paperbacks from the 70s and 80s, these are still worthwhile editions. They all have the original text editions before Hitchcock was removed as a character after his death in the 1980s, and they're nice, affordable ways to get the series when you find them, because trying to complete a whole set of the Three Investigators series is a challenging and expensive thing to do these days, since the fan base of us who collect these is very loyal, and we're all trying to seek out different editions. And if you go on eBay, you'll see very quickly how much just a random paperback in varying condition can go for. So I pick up any editions I find when they're cheap, which they rarely pop up, but this is just one of the Scholastic ones. The only trouble is these don't have the internal illustrations from the original hardcover editions. Those didn't last in the printings after a certain point, and they didn't make it over to the Scholastic editions. But these are just wonderful books if you've never read them. They're a must for all Hitchcock fans. It's one of the best children's series of all time. The writing quality is really fantastic, and the imagination level is really something. Even though the original author, Robert Arthur, didn't write all of them, all the books maintained a really high level of quality that is not really matched by any other series. This is basically the closest competition to the Hardy Boys in terms of children's series literature that is timeless and iconic. And if you talk to anybody who remembers this series, reading it when they were growing up, you just see their eyes light up, because this is a magical series that can still be read and enjoyed today, and really should. But unfortunately, the series is not really popular anywhere but Germany, where it still has a very loyal following, strangely enough. And it was ironic finding this at another bookstore in their bargain bin. This was literally only a quarter, so of course I was going to grab it, because at the half-price books, they had, in their collectible section, they had a beautiful, very minty condition copy. I believe it was, I think it was a second edition. I don't think it was a true verse, but of the original hardcover of Screaming Clock. And it was priced, rather affordably for what a early edition Three Investigators mint condition hardcover can go for, because they're hard to find. They're hard to find in good condition. The binding is the first thing to go, because they were Scholastic books and they're known for that. But I was very tempted to purchase that. Unfortunately, I happened to open the book, and the odor and the mustiness and the tanning of the pages were enough to knock you down. So needless to say, I didn't get that as much as I wanted to, simply due to the actual interior condition being, unfortunately, not something I wanted to invest in. And then, lo and behold, at our other bookstore, I found the Scholastic printing for a quarter. So I just found it kind of ironic that it was actually the same book, which you rarely see any Three Investigators anywhere, but that was just a fun occurrence, and it slightly makes up for having to pass on that otherwise beautiful original hardcover edition. Here is what you're more likely to see, and probably my favorite iteration of the printings overall, and that is the later Random House beautiful printing with the Robert Andragna art, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope I am. He wound up doing cover art for the entire series up through this point, and did new updated covers for the other books. Now, this is book 24, and this is from what is known as the Keyhole series, seeing as the little logo here has a keyhole. Now, originally, it had the famous Hitchcock profile, and this is one of the updated texts after Hitchcock's death. They sort of reworked the book slightly and replaced the famous introductions and closings, where the boys would present the case to Hitchcock himself, and Hitchcock, or the person writing as Hitchcock, would make the little introduction notes. Now, all of these were replaced, but the text were not really changed except for any mention of Hitchcock. They were changed to a character of this mystery thriller writer of Hector Sebastian. So all of the books were updated to have this character in it instead. So it does make two texts of the majority of the series, but it's not like the Hardy Boys, where the books were completely rewritten. It's basically just the opening and closings and any mention of Hitchcock himself, which is understandable. I think it's unfortunate they did it to the earlier books and didn't just take over on the later ones. But that's an interesting thing to note, and that's why you'll see people mentioning Hitchcock cover or keyhole cover for the books predating this. So this is one of those. That's why it has the keyhole cover, but it's a pretty good condition copy, seeing as usually when you find these, they are pretty trashed, and you're lucky to find any version. It does have a little bit of tanning, and there is unfortunately a little tiny bit of the front cover missing in terms of the corner, but that's also pretty common. Anytime I find cheap, solid copies, I try to pick them up, and I usually, do trades with other fans, and I try to improve volumes of my own collection slowly. I do have most of the series now, but I am trying to complete the entirety of the series, plus all the spin-offs and the other attempts to continue the series. And I'm also trying to get a version of both the Hitchcock original text and then the slightly updated text with Hector Sebastian for all the other books. But This is still a series I adore reading and collecting. I've been doing it since I was a little kid, and it's always fun. The rare times I meet other people who actually remember the series fondly, especially when I go up to the counter and somebody sees I have a T3I book, and they're like, "Wait, what? We had some of these?" It's like, "Yes." And then you get that feeling they're going to run off from the counter and go look on the shelf. But anyway, it's just a fabulous series to collect, but it does take some doing because they very rarely pop up. So it's exciting anytime one actually does. Next, I already own a copy of this, but this is the fancier Norton trade paperback with the kind of cool cover, and it was literally in the dollar bin, and I couldn't resist. So I had to grab this version of Strangers on a Train, the wonderful Patricia Highsmith novel, obviously the inspiration for the Hitchcock film of the same name, but this is a wonderful book that is very different to the film. It was heavily adapted. Let's just say if you've never read the book and you love the film, well, the book's going to be a real eye-opener because the central premise plays out quite a bit differently. It's a much darker story. So this is one of the most fascinating properties Hitchcock adapted into a film to then go and read. The film is a masterpiece. Well, the book is also excellent, but it plays out in an entirely different way. So those who know the premise probably know what I'm suggesting, but it doesn't matter knowing that as a sort of spoiler going into this, the book is still excellent. And this was the first Highsmith novel I actually read. This is what got me wanting to read the rest of her books, and of course brought me to the famous Ripley series. So unfortunately there's no extras, but it's just a nice fancier trade paperback version. I'm sure this is probably what you'll come across if you're looking to get a copy now, and I'm a sucker for fancier trade paperbacks of classic mystery and crime novels. Speaking of mystery novels, I was finally able to get a physical copy of a sort of mini-series, a series of 2 books that I really did enjoy. I thought they were a very interesting approach, and that is the officially sanctioned by the Conan Doyle estate Sherlock Holmes novels by Anthony Horowitz, the first of which being The House of Silk. Originally published in 2011, this is a slightly later paperback with rather nice art. I really like the blue and orange, and then the spine is a very bright orange, sort of looks like a penguin paperback almost. But the art is really nice. I really enjoyed reading this back in the day. I just always meant to get a physical copy. I would like to get the hardcover edition because it does have rather nice art, and I did really enjoy this. It is one of the best Holmes pastiches that I've read. I thought it held up really, really well, and it did at least get the flavor of Conan Doyle across extraordinarily well. I wasn't too big on the ending. I thought the ending was a little bit weak, but I have been wanting to reread it, so I've just been keeping an eye out for looking for a physical copy. Otherwise, I would have probably just gone on eBay to try to get the original hardcover. But this was the first of 2, the second being Moriarty. Wonder who this could be about. This is the original hardcover first edition with the really wonderful, nice, intricate dust jacket. Lovely design with a sort of silver foil on it. And of course, it's got the edged pages in terms of the actual stock. The end papers are rather nice. I always love it when Holmes books of any type have some sort of imagery of London at that time. It really helps to put you in that mindset. And then when you slip the cover off to see what the circle is sort of covering up or highlighting, you get this wonderful blood red rendering of the iconic going over the Reichenbach Falls. So Holmes and Moriarty locked forever in their eternal conflict. It's a really lovely, bold image, having it tinted in this blood red and black. It's also got a really thick gloss, so it's a glossy hardcover, and it's just duplicated on the back, but I thought that was a really nice touch. And of course, it gets highlighted when you put the dust jacket on. So this book takes place during the immediate aftermath where Holmes is missing, presumed dead, along with Moriarty, and it does dig into the villain's back history much more than had ever been done before. It's still a pastiche, so it still has the sort of energy that Horowitz brought to House of Silk, but it's going on a completely different path, and that gives it a sort of unique flavor. And our lead characters are themselves detectives who are not Sherlock Holmes, so it adds it is a different flavor. It's a different sort of feel. It's not going to be for everyone, but if you liked The House of Silk a lot, you will want to read this as well. And I really love what they did with the lovely hardcover edition here. So it was a treat to find lovely conditioned copies of both, because I'd been really wanting to reread them. Then I always try to pick up these when I find them for cheap and they're in good shape, but especially when you find an original hardcover copy with the dust jacket in good shape in the bargain bin as well. I mean, it makes sense because it's a big author, big name author, so these sold, bukus of copies. But I have always enjoyed going back and going through some of the old John Grisham novels. I sort of read the big famous ones from the 90s when I was growing up, and they're still fun to read. And so every once in a while I check out some of his later books, but I don't really follow them. And there is some repetition in the other ones that I've read of various themes and sort of characters and story elements. So there's a little bit of that vibe, but I've meant to finally go and read all the ones that I hadn't. So I always keep an eye out, and so when I see some copies floating around in a bargain bin, and again, especially hardcover editions, so this is 2011's The Litigators. So again, this is one that I have not read. I've read most of the famous ones from the 90s and early 2000s, but outside of that, I've only read one or two of the later ones. And then they also had 2016's The Whistler, again, in a lovely original hardcover edition, literally for the price of the usual paperbacks you find floating around. So these are just two more for the shelf that I sort of sporadically update when I find affordable reading copies, just for sheer curiosity. And again, I've always meant to read some of the later books, so that these are just two more for my never-ending to-read shelf. And then lastly, this was in the bargain bin at half-price books, so it was literally $1, and I didn't know this existed. So it's a comic, so it's one of the few times I start dabbling in comics, but it's a graphic novel version from IDW of Matheson's classic The Shrinking Man. And I just, not too long ago, finally read the book after looking at the Criterion Blu-ray, and then did a comparison of the two, and they are very similar at their core, but dramatically different in the denouement and also the actual construction of the story itself. The actual type of plotting that Matheson uses is very unconventional. So this seems to try to exactly replicate the novel in book form. It does have the suggested for mature readers, but I've already leafed through it, and it does have the same out-of-time sequencing that Matheson had in the book. It has a lot of the really striking, very adult scenes in the novel that are nowhere to be found in the film. So don't be mistaken in picking this up and thinking that this is a graphic novel adaptation of the film, which is excellent, of course, but it is actually doing the novel, which is far darker. But you will see very much a lot of the images are obviously inspired by the famous images from the film. So there's a bit of that trickling in, but it just seemed too interesting to just leave there. And of course, I had no idea this existed. It does have a little bit of extras in terms. David Morrell actually wrote an afterword about Matheson and the story and its impact on him. And again, I always love it when graphic novels have actual extras. And then it's got a whole section about adapting the novel to comic form. And this is apparently part of a series that they were doing of doing various classic works, and they apparently did do a number of Matheson stories in comic form. So I'm very interested now to look at some of these. I knew I Am Legend had probably been done as a comic. I remember seeing that somewhere, but I didn't know that other Matheson stories had been done. And then there's also a little article about the film as well. So this was just a pleasant surprise that I discovered sitting in the store's bargain bin. So here are the spines. So once again, this is just a little short update video of, I guess, my little sort of book haul from the local bookstores and our half-price books location having a little store sale. As always, I'm fascinated by the things that turn up in stores, and I do try and keep in mind that I have too many books already in terms of my space, and try to keep the budget down. So I think it's helpful to have a few little sort of set rules in your head of, don't go over a certain amount unless it's something really rare or special or you've been looking for a while. And condition is very important. So again, I really wanted to get that beautiful edition of Screaming Clock, but unfortunately, the odor and the mustiness was so bad that it didn't really seem salvageable. So things like that do help because, especially if you're like me and you've had allergies before and you're not good with mold and things. Mustiness is something that can and definitely does happen frequently, especially when you're like me and you like older used copies of books and you like getting old used paperbacks. Well, that's going to happen. So you do have to use discretion when buying books, I think. And it does help to, again, have your own sort of rule set so that way you don't literally try to just buy the entire store, no matter how much you may want to. It's not a good thing to do, even though your bedroom may already look like a bookstore. So anyway, this is just what I picked up in the past couple weeks at our local used bookshops. I always try to go every couple weeks and just sort of bunt around for 30 minutes or an hour or so. Again, also giving yourself a time limit helps for not trying to buy the entire literal store, as I said before. So also giving yourself a time limit and a budget helps. So I hope this has been fun and informative. If you like listening to me babble on about book hunting and book collecting, as always, keep supporting your local independent bookstores to help keep them in business. Keep reading print books, and thanks ever so much for watching.